Counsel would come to Madison County after he left Jackson County and established the very first African-American school outside of the city known as Lincoln School. After Counsel established Lincoln School, he would jump into politics. He used politics to establish deep educational roots. 5 or 6 years later, he would have formulated and established what we know as Alabama A&M University today, which was established May 1st, 1875. Although we know Counsel primarily from being an educator, Counsel was a religious leader, an editor of his own magazine, a lawyer, an author, a famous orator, and an internationally known speaker. But to stay along with the theme, civil rights 50 years later, let's take it and say civil rights 126 years later. In 1887, Dr. Counsel bought a first-class ticket, traveling along railways, traveling from Chattanooga to Atlanta. The federal government created the first regulatory agency known as the Interstate Commerce Commission. It was originally established to protect farmers when they would ship their produce along railways. But they also gave the agency regulatory authority to make sure that all passengers were treated fairly. 6 days after the commissioners were established, Dr. Counsel challenged the system, bought a first-class ticket, and sat in first-class accommodations, traveling between the hours of 9 and midnight. Needless to say, the employees immediately rushed Counsel and told him, "Sir, you have to move." Counsel told him, "Well, you have to provide first-class accommodations since you took my money, unless the conductor tells me to move." The men proceed to the conductor. The conductor comes back along with a few brakemen, again and proposed Dr. Counsel, "Sir, you have to move." Counsel again, legs crossed, sits back, calm demeanor, and replies again, "You have to provide equal accommodations since you took my funding." Without a second's notice, one of the men strikes Counsel with the lantern. Blood begins to pour from his face. Counsel fights like a raged lion, but it takes 2 or 3 to detain him. They throw him into the Jim Crow section or the colored section. At this time, Counsel's a lawyer. Of course, he deports before he gets to his destination, which was in Atlanta. He comes back to Huntsville. He sues the federal government for $25,000 in 1887. They didn't award damages, but the federal government changed the law that said if blacks or anyone purchase a first-class ticket, they have to be treated with equal accommodations. And this created the doctrine of separate but equal 9 years before the Plessy versus Ferguson court case. 2 months later, students at Alabama A&M University would also follow in Counsel's footsteps. They too would board the train. Before the students would return back to campus, Counsel was proposed with 2 options. You've stirred up so much stuff around the community. You can either resign and we'll replace you with someone else, or we'll shut down Alabama A&M by the next legislative session. Counsel says, in dismay, "For the love I have for my race, I tender my resignation," and he resigns 1887, June the 4th. But because he made such a rapport among his community, organizations, churches banded together and had Counsel reinstated a year to date, the following year, on June 4th, 1888. So although he was a notable educator, he was also a multifaceted international figure. So when we reflect on the life of Dr. Counsel, I believe we should also remember him as an educator, but also view him as a pioneer in so many assets as well. Thank you.